Let My People Go Surfing: The Education of a Reluctant Businessman, by Yvon Chouinard. Introduction. Picture this. It's 1962, in Winslow, Arizona. Two young men, dirty from the road, are pulled from a freight train they'd been riding. They have only 15 cents between them. The police arrest them on a charge that sounds like something from a bygone era: wandering around aimlessly with no apparent means of support. They spend the next 18 days in jail, losing 20 pounds on a diet of beans and Wonder Bread. One of those young men was Yvon Chouinard. And that charge, wandering around aimlessly, was, in a way, the perfect description of his life's philosophy. He wasn't aiming for a career, or a corner office, or a stock portfolio. He was aiming for the next great rock climb, the next perfect wave, the next wild river. He was a climber, a surfer, a blacksmith, a falconer. The one thing he never, ever wanted to be was a businessman. And yet, that same man who was once jailed for having no means of support would go on to build Patagonia, a global brand worth billions, a company that would change the face of the outdoor industry and become a gold standard for corporate responsibility. How does a self-proclaimed dirtbag who lived on 50 cents a day, ate cat food to save money for climbing trips, and slept under boulders for 200 nights a year become the founder of one of the most respected and successful companies in the world? That's the incredible story we're diving into today, from Yvon Chouinard's own memoir, Let My People Go Surfing. This isn't just a book about business. It's a manual for a life lived on your own terms. And over the next half hour, I'm going to share with you the roadmap he laid out, a roadmap that shows you how to build not just a company, but a life of purpose, adventure, and integrity, proving that you don't have to lose your soul to make a profit. You'll learn why the best way to succeed is to break all the conventional rules. Book summary. To understand Patagonia, you have to understand Yvon Chouinard. And to understand him, you have to go back to his childhood. He was the son of a tough, French-Canadian handyman, born in a small town in Maine. When his family moved to California, he was a small kid with a girl's name who couldn't speak English. He became a loner, an outsider from the very beginning. While other kids were playing baseball, he was running away to fish in private golf course lakes, hunt in the urban wilds of the Los Angeles River, and swim in pools of chemical runoff from movie studios. He was, by his own admission, a misfit. He hated school, had an attitude, and was always in detention. But he learned an important lesson early on: it's better to invent your own game, because then you can always be a winner. His game became the outdoors. He found a small tribe of fellow misfits in the Southern California Falconry Club. Training wild hawks taught him patience and the power of positive reinforcement, lessons that would unknowingly shape his future management style. It was through falconry that he discovered climbing. The club needed to rappel down cliffs to reach falcon nests, and for Yvon, it was love at first sight. He and his friends started practicing on the sandstone cliffs of Stony Point, hopping freight trains to get there. They had no special gear, just sneakers or bare feet and ropes stolen from the telephone company. This wasn't a hobby, it was an obsession. He spent his summers climbing in the Teton Mountains, faking his way into his first real rope climb because no one would take a chance on an inexperienced kid. He learned to be self-reliant, because in those days, there were no rescue teams. He lived a life most of us can barely imagine. For years, he supported himself selling gear from the back of his car, living on 50 cents to $1 a day. He and his friend once bought 2 cases of dented cat food and supplemented their diet with ground squirrels and porcupines. In Yosemite, he and his fellow climbers called themselves the Valley Kong. They were rebels hiding from the park rangers, proud that their passion had no economic value in society. To them, corporations were the source of all evil. So where does the business come in? Like everything else in his life, it happened almost by accident, born from a simple need. In the 1950s, the only climbing gear available came from Europe. The pitons, metal spikes hammered into cracks in the rock for safety, were made of soft iron. They were designed to be placed once and left behind, scarring the mountain. Chouinard, raised on the environmental writings of Thoreau and Muir, believed in leaving no trace. He needed a better tool. So, in 1957, he went to a junkyard, bought a used coal forge and a 138-pound anvil, and taught himself to be a blacksmith. He started making his own pitons out of a tougher steel from an old harvester blade. They were strong, they were reusable, and they didn't damage the rock as much. At first, he just made them for himself and his friends. But soon, friends of friends wanted them. He could forge 2 pitons an hour and sold them for $1.50 each. He was now, reluctantly, in business. His first shop was a converted chicken coop in his parents' backyard. His business model was simple. He'd load up his tools, travel the California coast, surf, haul his anvil onto the beach to hammer out pitons, and sell them from the back of his car. That little blacksmith operation became Chouinard Equipment, and by 1970, it was the largest supplier of climbing hardware in the United States. And this is where the story takes a turn. This is the moment that defines everything that Patagonia would become. Chouinard went back to climb the famous nose route on El Capitan in Yosemite, a route that had been pristine just a few years earlier. What he saw disgusted him. The fragile cracks in the rock were scarred and disfigured from the repeated hammering of his own hard steel pitons. The very tool that had made his company a success, the symbol of his craft, was destroying the mountains he loved. He had become, in his own words, an environmental villain. What do you do when your greatest success is also your greatest failure? Most businessmen would look at the numbers. Pitons were the heart of his business, the cash cow. But Chouinard wasn't a businessman. He was a climber. He and his partner, Tom Frost, made a decision that was, by any business standard, insane. They decided to phase out of the piton business. They chose to intentionally kill their best-selling product. In its place, they championed an alternative that British climbers had been using: aluminum chocks that could be wedged into cracks by hand and removed without a trace, leaving the rock clean. In their 1972 catalog, they didn't just introduce the new gear. They published a 14-page essay on clean climbing, essentially teaching their customers why their old products were bad for the planet and how to use the new ones. They were telling their customers not to buy their most popular product. The risk was enormous. But the result was revolutionary. Within a few months, the piton business had vanished. The new chocks sold faster than they could make them. This was the first major environmental step the company took, and it set a precedent for every decision that followed. When faced with a choice between profit and the health of the planet comes first. It was around this time that the clothing side of the business began, just as accidentally as the hardware. On a climbing trip to Scotland, Chouinard bought a regulation rugby shirt. It was brightly colored, durable, and the collar kept his gear slings from digging into his neck. Back in the States, his climbing friends all wanted one. He started importing them, and they sold out instantly. He saw clothing as a way to support the marginally profitable hardware business. But this new venture needed a name. They didn't want to call it Chouinard because that was for tools, and they had a vision for something bigger than just climbing. They settled on a name that evoked visions of far-off, windswept peaks and glaciers tumbling into the sea: Patagonia. In 1973, they created the now famous logo, a silhouette of Mount Fitzroy in the Andes. The growth of Patagonia was guided by a set of philosophies, a series of deeply held beliefs that are the true heart of this book. These aren't just corporate mission statements, they are a way of life. The first, and most important, is the product design philosophy. This comes directly from Chouinard's blacksmithing roots. A tool has to be functional. Period. At Patagonia, every design begins with a functional need, not a fashion trend. Is it durable? Can it be repaired? Is it as simple as possible? He was inspired by the French aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who said that perfection is reached not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. This minimalist, functional first approach is why Patagonia's clothes have a timeless quality. They don't chase fashion, because fashion is, by its nature, disposable. As Chouinard says, they aim to make art, which is timeless. This philosophy led them to revolutionize outdoor clothing. At a time when everyone wore layers of cotton and wool that absorbed sweat and froze, Patagonia looked for a better way. They discovered a synthetic pile fabric used by North Atlantic fishermen. The first fabric they bought was actually intended for toilet seat covers. It was stiff and came in ugly colors, but it was astonishingly warm, insulated even when wet, and dried in minutes. This led to the creation of chinchilla fleece. Then, they introduced polypropylene underwear, a material first used in disposable diapers for its ability to wick moisture away from the skin. With these two innovations, Patagonia taught the entire outdoor community the concept of layering: a wicking base layer, an insulating middle layer, and a protective outer shell. Their design philosophy also contains a radical idea: do no unnecessary harm. This led them to investigate their own supply chain. When they opened a store in Boston, employees started getting headaches from formaldehyde fumes off-gassing from the 100% pure cotton clothing. This discovery horrified them. They learned that conventional cotton farming is one of the dirtiest industries on Earth, responsible for a huge percentage of the world's insecticides and pesticides. So, just as they had done with pitons, they made another radical decision. In 1994, they committed to switching their entire cotton sportswear line to 100% organic cotton by 1996. At the time, there simply wasn't enough organic cotton available. They had to go directly to the farmers and build a supply chain from scratch. It was a massive financial risk, but they did it. And every cotton garment they've made since has been organic. This commitment to cleaning up their act is a continuous process. They developed fleece from recycled soda pop bottles, created wetsuits from plant-based rubber to replace toxic neoprene, and tirelessly worked to eliminate harmful chemicals and dyes. The second core idea is the human resource philosophy. This is where the title of the book comes from. The culture at Patagonia was never that of a typical corporation. It was built by and for independent, free-thinking people who loved the outdoors more than they loved work. Chouinard knew you couldn't order these people around. You had to trust them. This led to the Let My People Go Surfing policy. It's a flex-time policy that allows employees to go surfing when the waves are good, or ski when there's fresh powder, or go home to take care of a sick child, as long as the work gets done. They trust that adults will get their work done without being chained to a desk from 9 to 5. Chouinard's own management style is what he calls MBA, management by absence. He trusts his people, and that trust is repaid with fierce loyalty and dedication. The company also pioneered on-site childcare. In 1984, they opened a child development center, one of only 120 in the country at the time. They see children playing in the courtyards and parents having lunch with their kids in the cafeteria. They found that this benefit wasn't a cost, it was a profit center. It helped them attract and retain incredibly talented employees, especially women, and the productivity gains from parents not worrying about their children were immense. The third and perhaps most defining philosophy is the environmental philosophy. For Patagonia, protecting the planet isn't a marketing slogan, it is their reason for being in business. It started in the 1980s, when they pledged to donate 10% of their pre-tax profits to small, grassroots environmental groups, the frontline activists. Later, they upped the ante, committing to donating 1% of total sales, whether they were profitable or not. They call it their self-imposed earth tax. Since 1985, they've given away tens of millions of dollars. This philosophy led Chouinard and his friend Craig Matthews to start the organization 1% for the Planet in 2001. It's an alliance of businesses that have all committed to donating 1% of their sales to environmental causes. Their goal is to prove that environmentalism is not a cost, but a source of profit and a point of pride. But even with all this success, the journey wasn't smooth. By the late 1980s, Patagonia was growing at a breakneck speed, with sales exploding from $20 million to $100 million in just a few years. They were becoming the kind of big company Chouinard had always despised. He felt they were outgrowing their natural niche and losing their soul. Then, in 1991, they hit a wall. A national recession hit, and the explosive growth they had planned for, and bought inventory for, stopped dead. Dealers canceled orders, and their bank, also in trouble, slashed their credit line. They were facing a catastrophic cash flow crisis. The company had never laid anyone off before. It was like a family, full of friends and relatives. But they had no choice. On a day they now call Black Wednesday, they let go of 120 employees, 20% of their workforce. It was the darkest day in the company's history. This crisis was a brutal wake-up call. Chouinard realized his own company had become a microcosm of the global economy, dependent on unsustainable growth. He took his top managers on a walkabout to the real Patagonia in Argentina. There, surrounded by the wild mountains that gave their company its name, they asked themselves the hard questions. Why are we in business? What kind of company do we want to be? They came back with a renewed commitment. They decided to limit their growth to a natural, sustainable rate. They would not chase sales. They would focus on quality, on their values, and on their mission. The crisis had forced them to live by the philosophies they had always preached. It made them stronger, more focused, and ultimately, more successful. In recent years, that mission has evolved even further. Chouinard realized that doing less harm is not the same as doing good. That has led to their most ambitious project yet, Patagonia Provisions. It's a food company founded on the belief that modern industrial agriculture is one of the greatest threats to the planet. They are working with farmers and ranchers who use regenerative, organic practices that actually heal the soil, sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and help reverse climate change. They're proving that food can be a solution. From a kid jailed for wandering aimlessly to the reluctant founder of a global movement, Yvon Chouinard's story is a powerful testament to the idea that you can build a life and a business around your passions. That doing the right thing isn't just good for your soul, it's good for the bottom line. He never wanted to be a businessman, but by refusing to play by the rules, he became one of the greatest and most influential of our time. Commentary. So, what do we take away from all this? As I've spent time with this book, a few powerful lessons have really settled in my mind. First is the idea that the best businesses are not born from a desire for money, but from a desire to solve a problem. Yvon Chouinard wasn't trying to build a company, he was just trying to make better climbing gear for himself and his friends. The business was a byproduct of his passion and his relentless pursuit of quality. This is a profound lesson. When you focus on creating something truly excellent, something that serves a real need, the success often follows. The profit, as he says, happens when you do everything else right. The second lesson is about the nature of risk. On the surface, Chouinard seems like a massive risk-taker. He killed his best-selling product, switched to a new material no one was using, and gave away millions of dollars. But he's very clear. They always do their homework. Before they made the jump to organic cotton, they researched it exhaustively. Before they launched a new product, they tested it relentlessly in the field. It's a reminder that true courage isn't about reckless abandon, it's about making bold moves based on deep conviction and solid preparation. But the most important idea, the one that I think can change the way you look at the world, is the philosophy of the examined life. It's the idea that we have a responsibility to question everything, especially the things we take for granted. Chouinard didn't just accept that cotton shirts came with formaldehyde, he asked why. He didn't accept that his pitons were damaging the rock, he asked, is there a better way? This relentless curiosity is the engine of all progress, both for his company and for our society. We live in a world that encourages us not to ask these hard questions. It's easier to just buy the cheap t-shirt, to ignore where our food comes from, to believe that someone else will solve the big problems. Chouinard's life is a challenge to that complacency. He proves that one person, one company, asking the right questions can, in fact, change the world. So, how can you apply this? You don't have to start a billion-dollar company. It starts smaller. First, you can start leading your own examined life. The next time you buy something, ask a few more questions. Where did this come from? Do I really need it? Will it last? Is there a better, more durable, more responsible option? Second, embrace the philosophy that the more you know, the less you need. Instead of accumulating more gadgets and gear, invest in skills and knowledge. Learn to repair your clothes, your bike, your electronics. Mastery, not materialism, is the true source of freedom. And finally, find your own 1%. It doesn't have to be money. It can be 1% of your time. Find a cause you're passionate about, a local park, an animal shelter, a community garden, and give it a small, consistent piece of your energy. Action is the cure for despair. The story of Patagonia is the story of a man who never set out to change the world, but did so by simply refusing to compromise on his values. It's a powerful reminder that the most radical act in a world of consumption and convenience is to live a life of intention, quality, and responsibility. That was a summary of Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard. We've journeyed through the core of his philosophy today, but I have to be honest with you, listening to a summary is like looking at a picture of a mountain. Reading the book is like climbing it. The real magic happens in the details, the personal anecdotes, the quiet reflections, the moments where a single sentence resonates with something deep inside you. This summary is your map, designed to show you the terrain and help you decide if this is a climb you want to make. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. The experience of reading it yourself is where the real transformation lies. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey today has given you some value, a little bit of inspiration, or a new way to think, please take a moment to like this episode and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.